Welcome at Rick's Europe. The Netherlands, like many other countries in Europe, is currently facing an asylum crisis. For years, the Dutch government has tried to help as many asylum seekers as possible, but the limit has been reached. Currently, the number of asylum seekers is actually becoming so overwhelming that shelters are full and public services like healthcare, education, and housing are under pressure. The system is struggling to keep up, and rightfully so. People are thinking that if something isn't been done, the system can collapse. So to deal with this crisis, the Dutch government is thinking, or they're trying to start acting the emergency law, which would allow them to act quickly without needing to wait for the approval from the parliament. Now, this law would give the government actually more power to limit the amount of asylum seekers coming into the Netherlands and manage the crisis. Some people say this is necessary to protect the Netherlands and the resources and the stability. However, there has been some people that are raising concerns that it could actually undermine the democracy as it is bypassing the second chamber in the Netherlands. So the debate is actually really heated, and we are going to try to answer some of the most concerning questions. But to do it with us today is Yernaz Ramautarsing. He is a political scientist. Yernaz, thank you and welcome for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So this proposed emergency law would give the government more power. It would also allow them to bypass the parliamentary and actually come up with stricter measurements to really limit the asylum seekers coming into the Netherlands. Do you think this could actually really help solve the immigration crisis and the asylum crisis?
I think it could help because it would allow the government to do more things than they are allowed to do right now. Will it solve the crisis? Probably not. I see it more as a symbolic action also, and I see it also as a communicating measure to signal to the European Union we are serious about this. So you have to see the whole context. The Dutch have just written a letter to the European Union saying, "Hey, we want some form of opt-out." That's a signal, right? And the European Union responded quickly. No, you have to abide by what you agreed to before. Okay, but that's one sign. Emergency measures, that's another sign. So I look at it more as what is the government communicating to the EU? Because the moment the EU notices, okay, they are serious, and now we're only supported by Hungary, but let's say a couple more countries support us and say, you know what, we also want to opt out. Then it can get precarious for the EU. So that's more my thinking is how will the EU see this? And I also see it as a message to the EU. The letter we sent, we are serious. This cabinet wants to make changes. You better, help us out. You better compromise. And I think that's the most important thing about this measure is how will the EU respond and how will they view it?
All right, but Minister Faber, she's our Minister of Migration. She is saying that the Dutch public services is being overwhelmed. We have our Minister of Finances, Ilke Heijnen, who's saying that we are actually looming for a financial crisis if we are not curbing migration and the amount of asylum seekers coming into the Netherlands. Do you think that this emergency law would be enough, or should we look for stricter measures?
Well, I think we should take it in steps, right? We're trying to, I say we, but like this cabinet is trying to reverse like policy that has been in place for like over 30 years even. We're talking about treaties that have been signed by former prime ministers. So you're not going to do that in one try. So these are all building blocks to like changing our immigration system, to getting that opt-out, to convincing the European Union that we're serious. So it is definitely a crisis, but we have to take it in steps. So I think let's just take this first step and see what we can accomplish with that. And if that has been successful, then there's something to come back to. Then the government can say, well, we successfully did this and this. If you give us more powers or if you accept this new law, then we could do more of this. I think that would be the fine way. And you said in your question, like it would bypass the second chamber. Well, not really. it would actually give the government a little more time to put out the policy. But at a certain moment, the second chamber is going to come in. Just like during COVID, they also used emergency laws. The second chamber had to agree. So it does give the government more power, and they give them a little bit of time before they can be punished by the second chamber. But it's not as if when we adopt this law for the next coming years, there's nothing the second chamber could say. If there's a majority in the second chamber against the policy, they could stop it. But there's not. There is a majority for the policy. So it's not actually bypassing the second chamber. It's just giving the government a little more uh, playing room, you could call it, and a little more time before the second chamber can judge them. But they do definitely come in to the equation.
Well, that definitely silences the debate whether this is democratic or not for a lot of people.
Well, you could still argue about, is it really a crisis? Like, that's a different debate, right? You could still say, I don't think it's a crisis and they're abusing the law. So that could be a debate. But the idea that when they adopt the law, the second chamber has no chance, there's no influence, that is not true. I just wanted to nuance that.
That's good. So to continue, I mean, obviously, there are a lot of people that come to the Netherlands and seek asylum. They are genuinely refugees that are fleeing from war or persecutions within their own country. But a lot of those people are also illegal immigrants, which has been an issue we've seen throughout the rest of Europe. And I think this is really what is trying to combat, not to combat asylum seekers who genuinely need help and safety, but those are coming here illegal and actually don't have any reason to come into Europe. So this is one of the questions we need to ask. Is the emergency law going to do enough? Because if we look at the rest of Europe and they can still get into Italy or Greece and they can go to the rest of Europe, like what is then in the end going to be the impact of the emergency law?
Well, that really depends on the Dutch public. If the Dutch public love the emergency law, if they approve of it, then that means that the parties that are in power now are probably going to improve their seat count in the next election. And at a certain point, the European Union has to accept, okay, the Dutch have turned the leaf. They have chosen this new anti-migration route. They have went to the voting box twice to vote in this parliament. They're still asking for an opt-out. Then you're starting to get into a negotiation with the European Union, I think. So it would really depend on what the Dutch public thinks of it. They seem to love it. They support it. They want less migration. They seem to be heading that route. So if this government does what the people want, yeah, I can see them staying in power for a long time. These parties, at least the parties that want to limit migration. And in that case, the European Union cannot say, oh, it's a fad, it's just one populist government. No, then the European Union would have to accept, okay, the Dutch have turned a new leaf. We have to accept this reality of the Dutch as an anti-migration nation now. And I expect that to take a couple of years. You know, it's a long time that we've had a certain reputation in Europe. Tolerant, open, pro-migration, even under Mark Rutte. We've had that reputation, and it takes a while to change the perception also of your European counterparts. So I think that's the most important thing. But this cabinet is doing what the people want. Like, they have been voted in with this mandate. But the thing is, the Dutch system, the parliamentary system we have, is so aimed at working together that, you know, the party that was the most against migration only has half the seats of the cabinet. So they also had to make a lot of compromises. But the biggest party that won last year was the anti-migration party.
Yeah, that's a very clear message from the Netherlands. And like you said, I feel the tides has been changing. People are stricter now on migration the way they view it in the Netherlands.
Oh, I also wanted to address what you said about like the asylum seekers and the people who actually shouldn't be here. I actually was on a television show like 10 years ago where we went along the refugee route the other way around. So we went to Syria, we went to Turkey from the Netherlands, and I met a lot of refugees also. And you're right, it's a mix. it's a mix. People have terrible stories. Some people really fled for their lives. Other people are just honest and told me I had a chance to get on this boat. I saved 2,000 euros. And when I'm there, I'm going to get my wife because I want a better life. You know, you can sympathize with that too. So it's a big mix. And I think that's also the problem. I think that if the Dutch people were convinced that the only people that are coming in are the people who are fleeing political violence, if it was like Yazidis or Kurdish people or just people fleeing war, there would be a different response. I think it's also the notion and the impression among the Dutch public and maybe many in Europe that a lot of the people that come here are young men of fighting age. And, you know, that doesn't really give the impression of people that are suffering, even if that's not fully correct, but that's the impression people get. So that makes it a hard sell. Like if you try to tell people we have to spend money to save people who ran for their lives, a lot of people in the Netherlands would be like, okay, that's fair. But the moment they think we have to take care of people who just want to come here and import their wife and their kids and they just want to take our houses, then it gets a whole different dimension. So I think that would be incredibly important to make that demarcation between those groups, because the sympathy really differs depending on the group.
Yeah, and we've made that distinction clearly in this whole interview. So I'm happy that you're emphasizing that once again. And with that, we have come to the end of the interview. Yernaz, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights, and thank you, of course, for watching.